Okay, I want to be very, very clear. I am not, I repeat, not in favor of poaching or killing animals for sport. I happen to love animals very much. However, I will say that the concept of a big game hunter is both impressive and daunting. The idea of a person hunting creatures that are both enormous and super deadly is one I thought would make for an interesting character concept. So let's get to crafting this character and let's make it happen. So to start off with, we're going to actually use the standard array for our stats. However, the point system and the dice method still work. This is just to show the priority of the stats. Standard array gives us the following 6 base stat totals of 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. We are actually going to put the 15 in intelligence and the 14 in wisdom. Next, we're going to put the 13 in dexterity and the 12 in constitution. This will leave the 10 to be put into strength and the 8 to be put into charisma. Overall, this means you're going to have a very smart and cunning character of about average build but excellent skill level. But overall, they're not going to have any social graces, which is fine. These characters don't tend to have very good social graces anyway. So, just so everyone is aware, when you're selecting a race, literally anything from any of the official books will work. Trust me, you can just play any race and it just works for a hunter. However, in this case, I've decided to go with Wood Elf. A Wood Elf gets a +2 in their dexterity and a +1 in their wisdom. Side note, I do know now that there is a new rule that was introduced in Tasha's where any race gets a +2 and a +1 into any one of 2 stats. However, I didn't think of using this when making this, so just think of that when you're going through the rest of the video. Overall, however, if you go through with what I told you, this means that 3 of the most important stats, that being intelligence, wisdom, and dexterity, are all going to be 15, which is a solid start to have at level 1. On top of that, you're also going to get the trance rest form and dark vision, both of which I think are good for any self-respecting hunter to have. Now it's on to selecting our background. After looking through all the various backgrounds, I think there are 3 that stand out to be the best options, those being criminal, noble, and outlander. Criminal if you want to be more of the poacher type, noble if you want to be some rich person going on safari, kind of like Teddy Roosevelt, or outlander for those who actually hunt for survival or for trade. For my personal selection, I go with outlander because I know hunting for trade is actually an honorable profession as opposed to just hunting for sport. However, something to just keep in mind is that most variants of this build for your alignment are going to be neutral to some extent. Now that we have our stats, race, and background figured out, now it's time for the actual multi-class build for this. The first level you're going to take is going to be put into Artificer, which you can find in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. You are not imagining things. I did in fact say Artificer. In fact, this build is actually going to be an Artificer Ranger combination. But the reason we're selecting Artificer first is because 1, you get to learn cantrips early on, and 2, you get to know infusions right away because our big game hunter is going to need those. However, when you hit level 2, you want to take that first level of Ranger immediately. However, I will say to fully realize the creation of this concept, you will need to be at least 3 levels of each particular class. Starting with the Artificer, at level 3, you're going to know 4 infusions, have 2 infused items, know 2 cantrips, and 3 level 1 spells. Wow, that's a mouthful. For the infusions known, I would recommend the Armor of Magical Strength, Mind Sharpener, Repeating Shot, and Replicate Magic Item, and that magic item either being Goggles of Night or Bag of Holding. Repeating Shot is the most important one to have because we're going to be relying on ranged attacks because this is going to be the specialty of our character. Having this infusion on a crossbow is going to be so clutch. Onto the spell list from the Artificer, we're going to actually take Mending and Prestidigitation as our 2 cantrips. Mending for repairing our gear, and Prestidigitation because you can use it to trick any of the targets our big game hunter will have. Your first level spells, you should have Alarm, Featherfall, and Sanctuary. Alarm for setting up a trap or a sneak attack, Featherfall for utilizing movements from high ground, and Sanctuary to give our big game hunter a quick made safe zone. Since Artificer selects their subclass at level 3, we're actually going to select the Artillerist, which will give you the Eldritch Cannon. This is essential to this build. The cannon has 3 variants, 2 of which count as a ranged attack. Well, actually, 1 counts as a ranged attack, the other one counts as an AoE attack. But the third one can also count as an extra defensive measure, all 3 of which can be useful for this build. Once you have all that, we move over to the Ranger portion of the build. I recommend as your favorite enemy picking either Beast or Monstrosity to give that, vibe of being a hunter. Personally, I lead towards Monstrosity because it gives me Monster Hunter vibes, and I think that's so cool. For favorite terrain, I would say grassland, as it is the closest to a savanna or a safari as we're going to get. At level 2, you get to select both your fighting style and the ranger spellcasting knowledge. I of course recommend the archery fighting style. This style makes it easier for you to hit with your ranged weapon attacks. For the 3 starting spells, I recommend knowing Fog Cloud, Hail of Thorns, and most importantly, Hunter's Mark. This brings us to the level 3 archetype choice. For this build, the Hunter archetype is the best one, which you can find in the player's handbook. And I would select either being a Colossus Slayer or a Giant Killer. Me personally, I say Colossus Slayer just to get the extra damage. So I know this build is a bit strange, but hear me out. The cannon itself can count as a ranged weapon, even though it's just a magical item. You can then utilize the cannon's abilities with your archery fighting style because you are proficient with it. In addition, the favorite enemy and terrain can provide extra advantages to our big game hunter. If you instead use the cannon more defensively, you can then use the repeating shot you put on your crossbow and combine it with Hunter's Mark Archery and Colossus Slayer. All of these are dangerous to any of these beasts. So far, this only brings our big game hunter to level 6, which that's kind of boring, so why don't we go up to level 4 for each class. This will provide either an ability score improvement or a feat selection for each class. If you choose to go for the ability score improvement, go for Dexterity or Intelligence. Dexterity will increase your AC and your martial damage, and Intelligence to boost your magic powers. However, frankly, I think Dexterity is a better bet for this build. If feats are more your forte, I recommend either Alert, Spell Sniper, Sharpshooter, or Crossbow Expert. Alert will make it harder for you to be surprised. The others, however, will make any forms of attack easier to do, and on top of that, make it your hunter a lot more deadly. My 2 favorites personally are Crossbow Expert and Sharpshooter to give you extra range, advantage, and the ability to reload your crossbow as a normal bonus action or a free action. After this, the rest of the build is up in the air. So here are some of my final notes. This build is surprisingly versatile. Your AC is actually decent. Your attack range is fairly wide, long, and varied. In addition, this build can be useful for preparing traps and figuring out / exploiting weaknesses. There are, however, many downsides to this build in the fact that they lack strength, health, and is situationally dependent. First of all, they're a ranger, which is already situationally dependent. But second of all, they have the weakness of being 2 half-casters that are just put together. The hardest part of this build, however, is how slow this build fully manifests itself. If I could do it my way, I'd say start at a level 2 campaign instead of level 1, so that way you can have level 1 in both of your classes, that way you have your bread and butter just to start off with. However, afterwards, I would recommend building one up to level 4, and then build up the other one. But if you're starting in a higher level campaign or a mid-level campaign, this is kind of a moot point. So it really depends on what you're doing. So personally, it's going to be kind of a hard build to do, but I think it would be very fun to roleplay. But let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments below some ideas that you have. Now, good luck and have fun delving in those dungeons. See you next time.